The Mavericks are clicking on both sides. We will look at Dallas's offense and defense, as well as the Luka and PJ effect. Then we'll recap the NBA Cup and look at trends for the Bucks and the Thunder. And finally, history was made in San Antonio. Merry Christmas, y'all. Let's go. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Control Room. I'm your host, Esrael Johannes. Thank you so much for the response to the last episode. It's already crossed 1,500 views, which is almost 10 times more than anything I've had on this channel in terms of a full episode. Now, the last 3 weeks, I've been dealing with some health issues. So as soon as I released that last episode, I was so sick that I couldn't even speak. And then as soon as my voice came back, I was coughing violently to the point where I couldn't sleep. So I had to wait to record. And then by the time I was healthy, I was starting to cover high school football championships in Texas. So it's just been a crazy 3 weeks. But now we're back and we're getting ready to enter 2025. But first, let's look at the last month for the Dallas Mavericks between the middle of November and the middle of December, because they have had a month to remember. Since November 16th, the Mavericks have been shooting 51.4% from the floor, which is second best in the league. They've also shot 41.8% from three, which is also second in the league. Their three-point rate is at 39.5%, which is 22nd, still the bottom third. Their offensive rating is the best in the NBA at 120.3. Their net rating is at 9.7, which is second, and their plus-minus is at 10.4, which is second. And from November 16th to the middle of December, the Mavs have a 12-2 record, which is the best in the NBA. So we're starting off with the offense of the Mavericks because they've been trying to find this balance between utilizing the paint and shooting the three. And in the last episode, I was arguing that Dallas was the antithesis of the entire NBA because they tend to just go in the paint. Well, in the last few weeks, they've been really shooting the three a lot more. And it's mainly because they've been making them, but they've also understood when you're not making it, you also have the paint at your advantage. And so they've been trying to find that happy balance, that happy medium between how do we get our offense on any given night. So let's look at this balance between the paint and the threes since November 29th for the Mavericks. The Mavs have scored only 44.3 paint points per game, which is 22nd in the league. 35.5% of their points have been generated in the paint, which is 27th. Their restricted area field goal percentage, however, is 72.4%, which is third best. Their mid-range field goal percentage is 46.9%, which is fifth best. And then they generate 40.9% of their points from the three-point line, which is the sixth highest. And they're shooting at a 44.9% three-point rate, which is the 10th highest in the NBA. A little different than how they've been playing for a majority of this season. That led to what we saw against the Golden State Warriors, where the Mavs and the Warriors combined for an NBA record 48 three-point field goals made. That doesn't happen all the time, but hey, a box score that shows a final score of 143-133, there has to be some kind of explanation, right? If you're going to make it, might as well keep shooting it. Now, a lot of that offense for the Mavericks has to do with the return of Luka Dončić. And yes, he's been in and out of the lineup with some various injuries, but for the most part, he's back from what has ailed him for a longer stretch than he's faced all season. So let's look at his first 20 games and break them apart between the first 14 and then the next 6, because in between those margins, he had sat out for about a week with various injuries, but mainly a wrist. In Luka's first 14 games, he's averaged 28.1 points per game, shot 43.5% from the floor, 32.4% from three, 7.6 rebounds, 7.6 assists, and 1.6 steals. He also did not record a triple-double, although he had 4 double-doubles. 2 of them were points, rebounds, and 2 of them were points, assists. But in his last 6 games, within the first 20, he's averaged 30.8 points per game on 52.1% shooting, 42.6% from three, while also averaging 10.7 rebounds, 9.3 assists, and 3.3 steals per game. He's recorded 3 triple-doubles, 6 double-doubles, including the 45-point triple-double at Golden State. And his 3.3 steals per game actually leads all eligible players in December. When you look at how Luka's production has propelled the Mavericks so far, the first thing you might think about is this national media talking point that Luka's usage rate is ridiculously high, but that couldn't be further from the truth. NBA.com has Luka's usage rate at 31.8%, while Sportradar has it at 32.5%. It's much lower this year than it has been in years past. In fact, it's his second lowest usage rate in his career, and the lowest since his rookie season. Before and after the injury I mentioned previously, through the first 20 games, within the first 14 of those 20 games, Luka's usage rate was at 33.4%. In the last 6 of those 20 games, his usage rate was at 30.8%. In the 10 days that Luka missed, Kyrie had Dallas's highest usage rate at 29.6%. Jaden Hardy was second at 28.8%. So it's not really Luka that is the end-all be-all for the Dallas offense. Dallas has learned how to play without him, whether he's sitting on the bench or whether he's injured and isn't able to play. Dallas is much deeper than people anticipate, and because of that, Luka doesn't have to shoulder so much of the burden like he used to, because he'll tend to get worn out throughout the entirety of a season when he does it that way. So by doing it like this, the Mavericks are putting themselves in a good spot in terms of their longevity. Now, it's not just the offense that's very important, it's also the defense. And who is one of the most important players for Dallas on the defensive side of the ball? We learned very quickly that is still PJ Washington. Through the first 26 games this season, the Mavericks with PJ Washington have a 16-4 record with a 9.1 point per game differential, allowing 44.4% from the floor, allowing 35% from three, allowing 17.2 points per game off turnovers, and recording a 107.7 defensive rating and a 9.6 net rating. Without PJ Washington, the Mavs are 1-5 with a minus 0.3 point per game differential. They're allowing 47.7% from the floor, 37.4% from three, 20 points per game off turnovers, and recording a 115.7 defensive rating and a minus 2.1 net rating. Now, I've brought up the point before in previous episodes that without PJ Washington, the Mavs defense starts to fall apart. And it's reflected in the numbers very clearly. So much so that I am really wondering what is going on with Mavs Twitter or the Mavs internet. I don't understand. Why are we talking about trading PJ Washington? Why are we talking about trading away Daniel Gafford? It doesn't make sense to me statistically. And when you see how they play on the floor, PJ offers you so much length, and the way that he can defend in space, the way that if you want to go small, he's your 5. There's no justification to me in any of the analytics that you can let go of PJ Washington. He's that important to the Mavericks defense, and he's propelled offensively as well. So I want to look at how he's defending in isolation, and then look at how Dallas has been defending across multiple types of defenses. PJ Washington right now is allowing 0.48 points per possession on ISO possessions, which is the 4th best in the NBA among players with a frequency percentage of 10% or higher. Luka is on that list at 15th with 0.65 points per possession. And then if you look at Dallas's defense as a whole, Dallas's defense on ISO possessions is giving up 0.83 points per possession, which is 4th in the NBA. In transition, they give up 1.06 points per possession, which is 7th best in the NBA. On handoffs, it's 0.87 points per possession, which is 11th. Off screens, it's 0.82 points per possession, which is 4th. And then on putbacks, they're defending that at 0.95 points per possession, which is 2nd best in the NBA. So factor all those numbers, factor in the players that I just talked about, factor how Dallas has been playing as a unit on both sides of the ball. This defense is legit. This offense is also on fire. When those two sides of the ball are clicking at the same time, Dallas is practically unstoppable. There are two things, though, that I want the Mavericks to clean up because it's been bothering me a bit over the last several games. It's turnovers and missed free throws. Since November 29th, the Mavericks have 17.4 turnovers per game, which is 29th in the NBA. That's second worst, behind Utah. And they miss 7.1 free throws per game, at least since November 29th, which is the second most in the NBA. Only Denver has had more missed free throws per game at 7.4. It does help that Dallas has taken the most and make the most, but I would like to see them make more than that. It's more of, if you could be more efficient at the free throw line, then that becomes less of a worry for some of those games where you might turn over the ball a little bit more, or you might not be scoring from three all that well. It's those marginal things that bothered me 2 years ago when the Mavs fell out of the entire playoff picture that I want them to clean up so that it doesn't become an issue down the line. It's just something I'm looking at, but as of right now, the Mavericks are still clicking on both sides of the ball, and that is exciting, as any Dallas Mavericks fan will tell you. Next, we have a recap of the Emirates NBA Cup as the Bucks were crowned the second annual Cup champions. That's coming up next. Since I've been gone for a while, let's finish up the 2024 Emirates NBA Cup and recap how we got here. The final group standings in the East saw the New York Knicks take Group A with a 4-0 record and a plus 30 point differential, the Milwaukee Bucks taking Group B with a 4-0 record and a plus 50 point differential, and the Atlanta Hawks taking Group C with a 3-1 record and a plus 15 point differential. The Orlando Magic clinched the wildcard spot after losing to New York while trying to win Group A. They finished with a 3-1 record and a plus 45 point differential. In the West, the Houston Rockets took Group A with a 3-1 record and a plus 40 point differential. The Oklahoma City Thunder ended up winning Group B with a 3-1 record and a plus 45 point differential. The Warriors had already clinched Group C with a 3-1 record and a plus 8 point differential. And then the Mavericks clinched the wildcard spot with a 3-1 record and a plus 46 point differential. So where does that put these teams on the bracket? Well, let's look at the bracket. Based on how the standings shook out, the Oklahoma City Thunder got the 1 spot in the West, the Rockets at 2, the Warriors at 3, and the Mavericks at 4. And in the East, the Bucks were at 1, the Knicks were at 2, the Hawks were at 3, and the Magic were at 4. Let's start with the West quarterfinal. The Thunder won at home against the Dallas Mavericks and moved on to the semifinal in Las Vegas. And meeting them, the Houston Rockets took down the Golden State Warriors at home and advanced to Las Vegas as well. Then Oklahoma City beat Houston in Vegas and reached the championship game. On the other side, in the East quarterfinal, the Bucks won at home against the Orlando Magic, while the New York Knicks were the only home team to lose against the Atlanta Hawks. So Milwaukee and Atlanta played each other in Las Vegas in the semifinal, and Milwaukee advanced to the championship game. So you saw the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Milwaukee Bucks, where Milwaukee ended up winning the NBA Cup championship 97-81. Now, the NBA Cup championship game was a little odd to see, for lack of a better word. Let's look at Milwaukee and Oklahoma City's stats from that game. Milwaukee shot 42% from the floor, shot 17 of 40 from 3, 12 of 18 from the free throw line, got 52 rebounds, 25 assists, and turned the ball over 19 times. Oklahoma City, on the other hand, shot 33.7%, 5 of 32 from 3, 18 of 22 from the free throw line, got only 43 rebounds, 13 assists, but recorded only 10 turnovers. Their 5 3-pointers made is the fewest since April 3rd at Boston. I'm going to get into Oklahoma City's shooting a little bit later, but first I want to start with the winners of the Milwaukee Bucks. And who led the way? Giannis and Dame. Who else? Giannis Antetokounmpo scored 26 points on 10 of 19 shooting with 19 rebounds, 10 assists, and 3 blocks, and was named the NBA Cup MVP. Damian Lillard contributed with 23 points on 6 of 12 shooting, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 5 of 10 from 3. Now, Dame's 5 threes really killed the Thunder, and it wasn't just him that did well from beyond the arc. The Milwaukee Bucks as a team have been shooting the lights out from 3 and have multiple shooters that are contributing at any moment's notice. The Bucks had their 5th game this season with 4 or more players making 3 or more threes in a game. Now, if you include the NBA Cup championship game, let's look at the top 5 teams that have that stat. Boston leads the way with 13. Phoenix is second at 6. And then tied for third is Milwaukee, Golden State, and New York, each with 5 games with 4 players making 3 threes. Now, of course, remember, the NBA Cup championship game does not count towards regular season stats. But if you were to include it, Milwaukee would be tied third. They've really turned the page after that 2-8 start, where people thought that they might be in some kind of odd purgatory like Philadelphia with their injuries. But Milwaukee has really turned it around, and the 3-point shooting has been a part of that. But they've completely reformed how they've created their results. Let's look at how they've played offensively and defensively since November 12th, because that's when their turnaround really started. Milwaukee is scoring 115.1 points per game, which is tied 10th, allowing 109.3 points per game, which is 7th, shooting 48.9% from the floor, which is 5th, allowing 44.3% from the floor, which is 3rd, shooting 40.9% from 3. That leads the league since November 12th. And by the way, they record 6.2 blocks per game, which is 4th. In the 15 games since November 12th, the Milwaukee Bucks have a 12-3 record, which ties the best record in the NBA. On the flip side to the Bucks making those threes, they're not exactly living and dying by the 3 because they have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is driving, who is generating practically all of his points from the paint. But then you go to Oklahoma City, who was one of the best shooting teams last year. And they've kind of fallen off a little bit on their perimeter shooting. So let's check out the last 2 seasons for the Thunder. Last season, they scored 120.1 points per game on 49.9% shooting, 38.9% from 3, with a 118.3 offensive rating, which was 3rd, a 111 defensive rating, which was 4th, and a 7.3 net rating, which was 2nd. This season, the Thunder are only scoring 115.2 points per game on 46.5% shooting, 35% from 3, with a 114.7 offensive rating, which is 8th, a 103 defensive rating, which leads the NBA, and an 11.7 net rating, which also leads the NBA. And keep in mind, their 3-point attempts rose from 34.2 in 2023-24 to 39.3 in 2024-25. Currently, they're shooting 32.7% from the right corner, which is 25th in the NBA. Now, is the return of Chet Holmgren enough? Because we haven't seen him and Isaiah Hartenstein take the floor at the same time. And knowing those 2 bigs are there is going to revamp how they play offensively and defensively. The issue is that this has been Oklahoma City's shooting numbers all year long, and so that includes Chet Holmgren. The entire team has taken a bit of a dip in their perimeter shooting, which is a little bit worrisome because that's one of their strengths. And now that with Hartenstein, they have somewhat answered their rebounding issues, it still worries me a little bit because you're making yourself vulnerable when you can't make shots. It's not like they can't make shots. It's just that there are stretches in a game where they will have a 5 for 32 performance, although that is quite historically low for how they've been shooting. But if a team can generate a percentage somewhat close to that, maybe even within the 20% range or the low 30% range, you really give yourself a chance if you can kind of bait them into fouls, right? Because that's part of the defense, is that they are all over you. And if referees call fouls a certain way, they can get away with it or they may not. But there are statistical advantages when Oklahoma City isn't shooting that well. And we saw that evidently in the playoffs with Dallas, not only because they were limiting second chance opportunities for Oklahoma City, where they have not been thriving, and because they were shooting the ball better from the floor. So for Oklahoma City, if they want to get to the finals, they do need to clean up their offense a little bit. And of course, Chet coming back may help, but as a team, they need to shoot better from the floor. Full stop. They will not make it to the finals if their slump gets worse. They give themselves a chance at the finals if they're pretty much even with where they are right now, but they will shortly make the finals if they can get back to where they were a year ago in terms of efficiency from the floor. Now, let's look at the Western Conference standings, because although the Thunder had that performance in the NBA Cup championship game, they haven't lost a game since. Leading the way, Oklahoma City has a 23-5 record entering Christmas Day. The Houston Rockets are behind them in second at 20-9. Memphis is in third at 20-10. Dallas is in fourth at 19-10. Denver is in fifth at 16-11. And the LA Clippers are in sixth at 17-13. In the play-in slots, the Los Angeles Lakers are seventh at 16-13. The Warriors are in eighth at 15-13. The Spurs are in ninth at 15-14. And the Minnesota Timberwolves are currently in 10th with a 14-14 record. In the hunt, the Phoenix Suns are in 11th at 14-14. And in 12th, the Sacramento Kings are 13-17. Then the next three teams are pretty much tanking for Cooper Flag. 13th, Portland has a 9-20 record. In 14th, Utah has a 7-21 record. And in 15th, the New Orleans Pelicans have been ravaged by injuries and are 5-25 through the first 30 games of the season. Moving on to the Eastern Conference standings entering Christmas Day, Cleveland has a 26-4 record through their first 30 games. Behind them is Boston at 22-7. In third, New York at 19-10. In fourth, Orlando, surprisingly, at 19-12, despite all of their injuries. In fifth, Milwaukee has a 16-12 record. And in sixth, Miami has a 14-13 record. Although the Jimmy Butler news is one to watch in terms of the future of the Miami Heat. In seventh in the play-in slots, Atlanta is at 15-15. In eighth, Indiana is also at 15-15. In ninth and 10th, Chicago and Detroit are both 13-17. Chicago at ninth, Detroit at 10th. In the hunt, Brooklyn is 11-18. Philadelphia is trying to climb out of this hole as they're in 12th with a 10-17 record. Charlotte is at 13th with a 7-22 record. In 14th, you have Toronto at 7-23. And in 15th, the Washington Wizards have a 4-23 record. Now that we've updated the standings, let's transition to the top performer, because some history was made in San Antonio. If you've made it this far, welcome to the postgame. Now, this top performer is someone who's been in the league a very long time and has made his way through a leaderboard that most would say is untouchable. It is CP3. Are you with me? Chris Paul, December 9th, at home against the team that drafted him, the New Orleans Pelicans, back when they were called the Hornets. Chris Paul has passed Jason Kidd for second most assists all time. This list is entering Christmas Day. John Stockton leads the way at 15,806. Chris Paul is in second, entering Christmas with 12,129 assists. Jason Kidd is in third at 12,091. LeBron James is at 11,240 assists. Steve Nash is at 10,335. And Mark Jackson is one behind him at 10,334. Shout out to Chris Paul, the legend, for being the top performer for this episode. In the next episode, We will have an end-of-year update as well as looking at the Mavericks, of course, and some of the other hot teams in the NBA. Now, let's look at this Christmas Day slate. I am recording this before any game has gone final. So, Christmas Day, the San Antonio Spurs play the New York Knicks at noon Eastern, followed by the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks at 2:30 Eastern. The Philadelphia 76ers play the Boston Celtics at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Lakers play the Warriors at 8 p.m. Eastern. And the Denver Nuggets play the Phoenix Suns at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. All games are on ABC and ESPN. All right, that does it for me. Thanks for being here. Make sure to download this episode, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. Merry Christmas.